Hi, Sarah.
Hello, morning.
Welcome back, everyone, to It Takes a Village, a podcast where we are exploring deeper relationships and fostering community together. It has been such a great year. We are approaching one of our favorite seasons in the life of the church, Advent. We are in Advent and approaching the Christmas season. So there's so much to talk about, whether it's just Christmas parties and all the great things that this season brings, or diving deeper, head first into what's going on in each other's lives. It's been a great time talking to our community and to each other on this podcast. Sarah, how are you today?
I am good. I am good. Yeah, this year seems to have flown by, and I can't believe that it is already mid-December of 2024. You celebrated your 1 year anniversary with us as senior minister at Countryside on December 1st. So I know we talked about taking this time today during our podcast to kind of look back over this first year of you being here in Omaha and at Countryside with us and see what all has happened.
Absolutely. It's been such a full year, but I cannot believe, when I think about it, I can't really believe that my family moved to Omaha. I think Thanksgiving week was a year. So much. It's one of those things where when you move or just a lot of things, change in your life, it feels like so much has happened and also the time just flies by. And it's probably because, a 9-year old and 11-year old are growing like 6 inches every day. And so just, paying attention to the acute moments, right? Sometimes you just feel like there's never enough time in the day. But this year at the church, it's been incredible to be here, here in Omaha and at Countryside. Church, both of us probably, well, you're a PK, right? And then find your, continuing to find your way in ministry. And the church is kind of so much of our lives. I know for, Shannon and I, Shannon's also a PK and has been on a church staff for most of her adult life, and I have. So it feels like church is kind of the center of our universe. And so diving right into Countryside in the life of the church was really hitting the sweet spot for us. My favorite thing about church has always been the people, and helping to foster a space, co-create a community for connection and belonging. So that's what we've been doing the last year, bringing people together, creating safe spaces, giving folks an opportunity to, find deep and meaningful connections, which then can lead to life-changing transformation, friendship and support, spiritual growth. Countryside is a community who gathers around you to celebrate your wins and to support you in your losses. So for me, thinking about the last year, there's so many things to highlight. And I could talk, way too longer than we have on this podcast. But I have to say that this podcast, and its inspiration, the village at Countryside, is probably pretty high on that list because so much of what we talked about before doing this was, how can we provide something for people, for these people, for our community, to deepen the relationships that are already forming and formed, and then to bring people in, who maybe are new to our community. So it takes a village is pretty high on the list. How about you?
Yeah, well, I think especially doing this podcast, I know it's been, I guess we're on episode 14 or 15 today. So we've had about 4 months.
Mm,
Recording is always high on my list of priorities in the week, and it's always a fun time. So that's definitely been a highlight of my year, especially this fall. So
mm.
can you remind us, and for anybody new listening, how did the villages come to be, the village at Countryside?
Yes. I think, again, kind of coming new into a community and looking for, first of all, myself feeling so overwhelmed with the invitation and the generosity and hospitality of this community. And then knowing that people were coming, from different walks of life, new people in our doors all the time on the heels of a lot of change, a community who moved locations, a community who really made a huge commitment in so doing to move and be a part of Tri-Faith, lost some members who just weren't ready to make that move, right? So there are a lot of changes and transitions, whether it was staff or COVID or moving. So this big opening, right, to redefine who we are, whose we are, and we are each other's. So how can we create spaces? And for me, it was, how do I help create a clear pathway to engagement? for anyone and everyone. So this summer, after diving headfirst in, I take a mini sabbatical in the summers with my family to kind of rejuvenate and find renewal. And it's always in the mountains. So this summer we went to the mountains for a couple of weeks. And one of my top goals was really sort of how to envision a way to create a clear pathway, right, for anyone who's coming to countryside. And so I set aside time just during my hikes and just, on the mountain stream, like listening for how God and Spirit was calling me to bring something and open up those doors. As a new person coming in, you can kind of freshly see or listen for how are we doing things really, really well, and how do people who want to be a part of those amazing things, how do they know about those, and how do they, find a way in? So doing so allowed me just the time to kind of simmer on those things. And I read David Brooks' book, right? Traveled all over the country. I don't recommend 3 weeks of driving in the car with your kids all over the mountains, but it was really amazing. But in the car, we all found something to do. And for me, it was reading David Brooks' book. I was reading out loud to Shannon half the time. And that book has been transformative, I think, for many of us, but it's how to know a person, the art of seeing others deeply and being deeply seen. And so in reading it, I kind of knew immediately this feels like the right starting place for us,
Mhm.
because countryside's already one of those intimate places where, you walk in and someone says welcome and they're so happy to see you and they mean it, right? It's this deep sort of, I see you, I want to see you. But it's really challenging in those moments to really take a step deeper, to go deeper. It can feel meaningful and then you kind of long for more, right? Well, how do I really want to get to know this person? I really want to be friends with that person. Oh, they're so great. They were so kind. And, I really need more. So I think David Brooks' book really prepared us, opening up the questions that can be kind of threatening when you're new in relationships or new in a community. Do I really want to be seen? Like, I don't know if I can trust these people, or do I
Mhm.
want to share my life with these people? And I think communally doing that, coming back, knowing that we needed to kind of launch a platform for small groups, gave way to the village at Countryside. And then we worked really hard as a team. As you know, we were all working really hard to put this together and launched that with this great dinner. And then we had over 125 people sign up, right away, which I think, I know for me and for all of us, it was like, yes, we really want to dive in. We really want to grow together in deeper relationships and get to know each other and ask hard questions, right? And celebrate. So that's kind of the start of the village, and this it takes a village. And I loved, doing the podcast. Every week we got to engage in those chapters and talk and think. I would love to hear your thoughts, Sarah. Like, looking back and thinking about Brooks' book, what now is sort of this lasting impact for you, or how do you see it forming and being a formative moment for our congregation and our community?
Yeah. No, I still think about different vignettes from that book. They just come to my mind throughout the week. And,
Mhm.
I was just thinking the other day about the story of the therapist who really stuck with
Mhm.
that difficult client,
Yeah.
who then shared with her that he had lost a son, and the way that in her steadiness of sticking with him, even beyond what probably most of us who read it felt was reasonable,
Yeah.
that she kind of was able to give him space to really reveal all of this pain that he
Mm.
carried with him that was kind of making him really difficult to be around for everyone. So I
Right.
think that Brooks did such a good job of having these really memorable and specific stories that also had sort of universal application.
Mhm.
And that helps us just have examples of ways that we can be with each other
Mhm.
and showing up for each other, knowing that we don't have to have all the answers, right?
Mhm.
It's like a lot of it is about engaging each other, being an illuminator, opening
Yes.
things up, leaving that space, really being curious about other
Mm.
people's lives and their backgrounds and their stories.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it really gave us a great groundwork for continuing to build our relationships with each other. And
Mhm.
for people who maybe haven't had as much practice in doing that, like maybe their work is more solitary, but they're working on how to engage with people in a more meaningful
Mhm.
way. The book really helped with that. Um, and I think it was great that it was fairly neutral we
Hmm.
were starting all this off in such a political season as we led into the presidential election. And
Hmm.
so, while we as people and people of faith are not neutral,
Yeah.
the book helped us be in relationship and get to know each other without necessarily having an agenda about, you
Mm.
know, what people had to be bringing beyond their own open-heartedness to be in
Mm.
relationship. Um,
Yes.
and that being said, at the same time, we were working on really educating people about the dangers of white Christian nationalism. And
Hmm.
so I know we want to touch a little bit on some of the things that we did leading up
Mm.
to the fall, and had a great relaunch of the Center for Faith Studies,
Yes.
bringing in some great speakers for our Faith and Democracy, What's at Stake.
Mm.
Um, yeah, what was that like for you, and how has that springboarded into other endeavors for you here?
Yeah. I love you're saying that, like putting those things, like weaving those things together. I think, that whole understanding that the neutrality of approaching an opportunity to dive deeper into relationships or to understand what you bring to the table, or that book creating this space for kind of anyone to take one step at a time or five steps in, gave people the opportunity to see themselves as equally invited to the table, no matter what you're bringing or who you are or how long you've been here, which is so important. And then creating this safety net for people who then need to know who they're talking to or who's in the room when they're feeling vulnerable or something. We talk about the election or the presidential campaign that was coming and people having a lot of angst, looking back, right? Sometimes looking back at a prior historical moment, you borrow this other angst, right? And so having the opportunity to already deeply engage with folks in these groups really was this beautiful way of saying, you know, maybe we have a lot of differences, or maybe a lot of differences are coming, and we're going to be in this really heightened emotional state. But right now, I just want to see you for who you really are. And this is who I really am. And I have, my own issues going, or I've got, my own kind of presence in the world that is defined by so much more than maybe my political identity or my like thoughts about X. So it gave people this deeper way of connecting, and then knowing how to maybe communicate when some of those differences are overshadowing like who we are just as people, right? Or people of faith. And so I love that. So then when we got to this moment in time where we were gearing up for the relaunch of the Center for Faith Studies, months and months earlier, some of those leaders had begun talking about, the theme being the rise and threat of white Christian nationalism, right? Knowing that those things were coming, it almost paralleled this opportunity to dialogue together, to get to know each other, to deepen relationship. And then when we got to that event, I think maybe because the question was, what's at stake? Well, not
Mhm.
only what's at stake for our country, maybe what's at stake for us in our own relationships. So, what's at stake? Maybe we could answer that question differently because we were preparing to see each other as human beings, as the seed of the
Mhm.
soul in each other, rather than just seeing our one dimensional sort of projected identities around who we vote for or what we think about a person. So the stakes are high with white Christian nationalism, right? And there's a real threat, and now even more of that threat is raining down its shadows upon our state, our city, our country, of course. But hopefully, as people of faith, we are more prepared because we've been able to build relationships, to ask questions, and we can do hard things together. And sometimes hard things mean distancing ourselves from people who maybe don't respect our boundaries, or distancing ourselves from reading too much of the news, or doing things that continue to interrogate who we are as a human being just because of what is at stake outside of our very incarnate selves. So I know that there are a lot of things going on around preparing us for this moment. You were really instrumental in launching that social justice film series, which I thought was such a beautiful, amazing way for like a summertime community just to come together casually, watch a movie, right? And then have awesome dialogue. I know one of the films was related to white Christian nationalism. There are several of those films. How did that resonate with people, or how did you see those like weaving into the greater story that Countryside is on and building relationships with each other?
I think the movies were really great. I mean, I look back on them really fondly. We showed Common Ground, in June, which is actually such a hopeful story,
Mm,
because it's talking about the soil degradation and all of these side effects of the way that we grow our food and what
yeah.
we've done to the land. And so it kind of feels a little bleak, but then it's
Mm,
talking about, and I'm blanking on the exact term, you might remember it, but it's really like healing the soil,
hmm.
um, and regenerating,
Regenerative
what,
soil. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And so it ended up feeling so hopeful because it's like, even if you think about these small plots of land
Hmm.
that can be renewed in this way. It's just like
Mm,
such a great metaphor for the way that we have this hope for repair and for restoration and all
mm,
that kind of thing. And then in July, we watched Growing Up Trans, which is a PBS
mm,
documentary. And we had Jody Dugan talk to us about some of the issues that trans folks face
yeah.
and will continue to face, with even more severity now that,
Hmm.
we're looking forward to a
Yeah.
Trump presidency, looking forward into the
Mhm.
future. And then we showed Bad Faith, which was a great documentary about white Christian nationalism, and
Mm,
had a speaker who was featured in the film, just kind of serendipitously offer to come
that's
and pop in with us. And so we had a great turnout for that event. And I
mm,
think that was a real highlight. We had people from around Omaha, from other faith communities, and from our neighbors here on the Tri-Faith campus too. So
hmm.
those were really great events over the summer that then helped to lead into what we were doing with Center for Faith Studies.
Yeah, that's so great. And I know folks who were a part of that event, were kind of a part of multiple of those video conversations, especially, Bad Faith leading us to this moment. The Center for Faith Studies, what an incredible arm, right? What an incredible just kind of think tank, spiritual formation institute. I mean, it's all of these things wrapped up in one. And you think of the forethought of leaders, lay people, of church members in Omaha, Cindy Kugler, Deb McCall, so
Mhm.
many of them who thought this was a need, and it not just a need so that we can bring amazing, spiritual thought leaders to challenge us, but they had authors, just amazing people who are shaping, our culture and our community. So it gives us this opportunity, with relaunching the center, to think about time and place and how countryside is positioned in the wider arc of our faith and politics, and maybe what's happening across the country. We either lead the way right here in Omaha, where people sometimes can be lost, in the Midwest. It's like, well, if you're not on the coast and all the information is, people kind of forget that we are, if you think about regenerative soil conservation, this is where the food is grown. This is where hands are tilling and moving. And so, kind of the heartland, right? This is sort of the heart of the people. And so, the opportunity to say that countryside can re envision how we are a leader as we talk about and as we listen together these important issues that are really affecting our daily lives. I mean, looking at the administration coming up, white Christian nationalism is a threat because mass deportations threaten people's quality of life and their humanness and their rightness to be with your children without disruption. Without, I mean, it's just, I don't even have words for it because there's nothing humane about some of the things that we're hearing, right? There's nothing um, that God would call us to do, right? To welcome a stranger doesn't mean to tear their family apart. And so
Mhm.
those are the kinds of things I think that, because we have amazing, incredible, committed, critical thinkers who understand what it means to be people of faith, to scrutinize our own text and scrutinize our lives around justice issues, and then go forth, right, with educating, with having hard conversations, and then affirming each other, right? We also need to be renewed with these wonderful spiritual thought leaders who come and pour into us as community.
Mhm.
So I think it's just such a gift that we were able to relaunch this year, bringing Jim Wallace here, one of the leaders, as I was growing up, a justice advocate, a lot, every step along the way. It's Jim Wallace is at the center of these conversations. He's pushing the envelope and making a way that where there is no way, where God says, you know what, I am here and part the waters. I think Jim is one of those people, who has been doing that for a long time. Sojourners, is always one of those places that were really challenging us to think deeper. And he took a lot of risks. So, of
Mhm.
course, having him here was great in his most exciting moment, I think, being with us was talking to my son about baseball and feeling like he offered, something back to the world. Just such an incredible human being. And I'm so thankful for him. And I know Jackie Lewis being here. I've known Jackie for a while. She's wonderful. And she and Jim, they're doing this work across the country with high stakes. She's an African American womanist, right? Theologian and a public theologian and activist who is putting herself and her own livelihood on the line when she's talking out against injustice. So these models for us, I think, are going to be formative for Countryside and for the greater community for years to come. I
Mhm.
look forward to what's next for the Center for Faith Studies. There's always, something on the horizon. So we'll be talking about those kinds of things coming up. But yeah, it's been really great. I'm so glad that we could do this work together here at Countryside, knowing that many folks who are kind of just in our wider community are really looking for a faith community who's willing to take a stand when things are really hard. And so we've seen that response, in this last month, especially post election, where people are kind of flocking to our community because, when things are hard, you want the church to say, you know what, that's not okay. And
Mhm.
we're here for you. So I'm really proud of our community for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we are, it's a little more behind the scenes and in-house, but it part of what we're doing to strengthen what we have the capacity to offer our community has happened through our board restructure this past year, naming the social justice board as an official
Yes.
board, and then having their chairperson be on council. So
Mhm.
being that liaison between the council and their board, they've been able to have looking at some of our UCC designations that just kind of help focus our attention on what a congregation needs to do to be living into our open and affirming covenant and being an open and affirming congregation in terms of LGBTQ welcome and inclusion,
Mhm.
um, our anti-racist group, advancing racial equity, and also looking into what it means to be an immigrant welcoming church. Um,
Yes.
all of these things are so foundational to us continuing to be on the front lines of social justice as a
Mhm.
congregation. So it's like some of that, church governance stuff that's not as fascinating to people,
Mm.
but is really essential to be able to live out this work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to sort of say on the fringe or to a community, oh, we really support these things, right? But when maybe not your leadership structure reflects those priorities,
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to really say that our community is backing this or really putting our full selves in. So restructuring to say that social justice, at the heart of who we are as people is also represented on the leadership board. So I'm so glad you said that. The designations have been really wonderful too, I think, for Countryside in the last few years. Understanding and kind of diving deeper into our UCC identity. It's so important to know who we are, that we belong to just this wider community of faith. These saints who've been doing some of this justice work, from the earliest time that our country was founded, right?
Mhm.
So knowing that we have these ancestors in the faith really uphold the work that we're doing now, knowing that people have been here before and it's been hard, but it is more than worth it.
Mhm.
This year, we were able to hear too from our A2A community, accessible to all. And I loved that book. I'm so thankful to that group, Emily Wadhams and Janelle Baber. The My Body Is Not Your Prayer Request. I'm always like, oh gosh, I want to learn more and understand more. But sometimes I see through these ableist, biased eyes and just am clueless, So reading and hearing this particular book and the voice and the power that she's writing with really was this gentle but, boundary pushing right in your face understanding of sometimes what we overlook because we have a very sort of ableist society, right? I mean, she talks about how cities are formed and how sidewalks are made. I mean, just in every space, this is similar if we think about racism and how that is, the eyes that we see through. Even ableism, you know, every single opportunity to create pathways for civic engagement are through ableist eyes, right? And so I think understanding that we still have so much work to do, but having a great community who is in our midst, right? Who are members, who are willing. right? To walk hand in hand with us, to teach us, to guide us, to invite us to more. That's really amazing. So many things I think that we have to be thankful for. So many of our people who are willing to just say, we love you and we want to help you learn and open your eyes. I think it's probably one of the things that Countryside does best, right? Love each other and hold each other's hands, even while walking through the hard things.
Hmm.
It's sort of there's a lot of openness around forgiveness. You don't have to have it all right. You just have to be willing to do the work. And I think that is at the heart of justice, right? Knowing that we're not there yet, but together, we can take one step at a time. Some people are 10 steps ahead on the journey, but it's okay as long as you're walking in the right direction, right?
Hmm.
We have to be walking forward. Another way that we've really imagined caring deeply for each other, which I think stems from this deep commitment to justice, right? It's this deep commitment to each other. And
Hmm.
we're seeing that in your ministry, Sarah, to congregational care. I mean, what an amazing, amazing commitment that the church said, really early on, we need more we need more care. And we need not only just care from our members, but we would love to bring Sarah Rental Jones full time, right, onto staff, which was so awesome. I mean, for me, sort of like an amazing colleague to work with, but also just valuing, like, our community values caring for pastoral care, and understanding that the paradigm shift from what is pastoral care to
Hmm.
congregational care, it means they want to take this risk to learn to care better for each other and more deeply. And so it's been great to how many months have you been full time? Is it 6 months?
I know it's May 16th, so I think that's 6 months, right? And now we're just on the cusp of
Yeah, like seven. Yeah.
maybe
So
seven. Yeah.
7 months. Yes. I mean, again, time flies. It feels like, I mean, you've
Because
been here for a lot longer, but in a full-time role, for this period of time. But you've already brought so much to the community, even when you were part-time, kind of giving a lot. But one of the things I'm most excited about, and this new initiative that you are spearheading, is the Web of Care ministry, which I know we've talked a lot about, but I would love for you, right, to talk about it because you're about to go, fully launch in
mhm.
January and February. So how is that going? How are you feeling about it? And what do we need to know?
Yeah, it's going great. It's great to talk about it today because our lead coordinators and I have just met twice this week. We had
Mm,
two meetings as we kind of intensify our work to be ready to launch Web of Care in the new year. We'll be bringing together our coordinators in January,
mm,
who were trained in the fall when we had Elizabeth Denham Thompson come from Denver to train our Web of Care coordinators in September.
mm,
We have a group that has been trained and will continue to recruit more, but we want to go ahead and get launched and
mm,
be able to let people know what Web of Care will offer them. And
mm,
so in the first quarter of 2025, we will have our Web of Care coordinators reaching out to everyone in the congregation
mm,
and letting them know about the beginnings of Web of Care, and we'll be assigning everyone their own coordinator.
mm,
Um, and so we'll be able to keep those connections. We know that some people will not feel the need for as much connection,
mm,
and we still want them to know that they have access to those resources.
mhm,
And for those who do desire deeper connection, then we'll be able to plug them in as well. And so
mm,
it's going to be really great. I think that as people see it unfold, my hope is that more people will want to be coordinators because they'll
mm.
see that it is accessible and it's something that seems like it's rewarding to the people who are doing
Yeah.
it, and it's
Mm,
it's not too intense or overburdening. So I hope that more people will want to be trained and we can plan towards that. But the initial rollout, I think, will just, even in contacting people to talk about it,
yeah.
doing that is in and of itself a connection. And so it gives
Yes.
people the chance to talk to people who maybe we haven't seen in our church for a while, but are still members of Countryside,
Mhm,
and hopefully to re-engage them, or to help them clarify what they're looking for in their community of faith and
mm.
be able to have some good conversations.
No, that's so great. I mean, it's going to be amazing. I know I've had a different experience in a different congregation with Web of Care, but I think it's one you're talking about. the more people see it and experience it, they'll kind of want to do it. I just remember feeling like it's like the who's who of the church, right?
Mhm.
If you're a web of care coordinator, I mean, just this esteemed, like, I love giving back and I love reaching out to people. It's so rewarding. And it became for me observing that and being the minister on staff, and working with staff, but volunteers, it was a very deep spiritual undergirding for our community because, I mean, that's what church is, right? If you don't, to care, to be like, the caring is what really brings us closer as a community. And so those relationships and the reaching out and the web, right, where no one's falling through the cracks, right? That's the goal. Really was this deep sort of sense of support.
Mhm.
And I think, I mean, I'm already seeing that with your web of care team. I mean, your co-coordinators are just so excited about it. It becomes something that you look back and you say, when you get it right, you get it really right. And
Mhm.
I think moving from a place that only paid staff or only highly trained people are part of the care system to know we all have an opportunity to care for each other and building that platform in multiple layers. It means like, we can hope that no one will fall through anywhere. No one will feel outside of it. So I am excited to see the excitement around it, and just people really looking forward to how they can plug in. So thank you so much. I think, come January, February, if folks get that phone call, it's going to be sort of oh, sometimes it's hard to say yes. I would love to have that kind of care. But part of, I think, the spirituality of hospitality, it's mutuality, right? Mutual care. So letting
Mhm.
someone reach out and letting your church support you and that person, that's part of God's call for us. So the saying yes to being cared for can be a spiritual practice as well. And it can deepen
Mhm.
sort of your own connection to God's love. So that's a really great opportunity for us to deepen our connections in our community. So there's so much. I mean, look at it. There's so much going on, and it's exciting to see, the energy around these new opportunities to plug in, to be cared for, to be trained. I mean, education is such an important part of what we do here.
Mhm.
So thank you for bringing that to us and for the enthusiasm, right, to launch new programs.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And I think that expanding, I love kind of how you even introduced it by showing the shift from pastoral care to congregational care, and that idea that we all care for each other,
Mm,
and that that's just part of what we do at church. It's not only when people have crises or are ill or are in times of deeper suffering, like it's just all the time.
mm,
We are a community, and we're a caring community. And so that means we
yes,
want to celebrate joys together. We just want to walk side by side together on our normal, ordinary, boring days.
yes.
And then we want to be there and have that foundation of relationship when we really need to lean harder on each other. So I think
Mm,
it's just a great way to kind of imagine everyone knitting together even more closely, and
mm.
knowing it's not only when there's like a deeper need that we're going to be really available to each other. We're available to each other all the time.
Yes, yes. I mean, I love it. And that can be, it's sometimes easy to think about that or talk about how that's important, but then
Mhm.
actually creating a system that supports
Yes.
that. And that's, I think, what people are like, and that takes a commitment. Yes, I'll sign up for that. Yes, I'll do that. But that's the only way you get there, right? By
Mhm.
saying we're going to plug those holes because we all
Mhm.
have a big heart for it. But when you actually start saying yes, then you see an action. Wow, taking those steps really is sort of key to how there no gaps anymore. So yeah, that's exciting. We've seen a lot of closing the gap, I would say, in a
Mhm.
lot of boards and a lot of parts in our community. I think like merging some of the boards with a board restructure. I think that work was probably being done before I arrived, right? There was a lot of work that went into looking at our structure and who we are and how we support each other.
Mhm.
But closing those gaps, like if you think of different boards who merged, sharing similar goals, but then kind of having overlapping goals and priorities and people allowed to close the gaps, like the Board of Christian Education and
Mhm.
Spiritual Growth really has been doing phenomenal work this year with adults to deepen their faith. I remember having uh, Vicky Roy is newer. Vicky and Joe are newer to our community from Lincoln. And I first had this conversation with Vicky, in my office is like, hey, let's think about, because we both had talked about adult formation, and she is new. And so looking with open eyes, how do we, have this pathway to make sure everyone's engaged? And we talked about, I said, hey, would you think about, making some plans to do some adult education after worship on Sundays? And it was a 45-minute conversation, and we just had a great time talking. And then boom, you let Vicki Roy go and that board, and she just got to work and really started working with others, Denny Clark,
Mhm.
on that board, and providing amazing Sunday and Wednesday programming. We've had so many great series, right off the bat. Denny Clark, again, a newer member, has so much to offer. He started us off with this really wonderful series on the Gospel of Mark,
Mhm.
which I think was just so huge in helping kind of set the tone for, the kinds of opportunities that we wanted Countrysiders to have, and these amazing gifted teachers, right? These people who have so much to offer us. So that Sue Califf did another wonderful series on providing hope in difficult times. And, even baseball with Joe Roy, inspires us to look at who we are as people of faith and how we can come together. So that was, I mean, adult education and that board, I think that's been another kind of hole that we've closed the gap on in so
Mhm.
many ways, and folks have really responded. Even a small group of 8, who go to a adult education offering, can have really great conversations and
Mhm.
walk away, really feeling inspired and supported in their faith. So I'd love to watch that this year.
Mhm. Yes, and I know Vicky's already working on some additional programming for the new year. And
Oh, I'm sure.
I think, as far as I know, she's already has some bookings into through the first quarter. So
I'm
a
sure
lot
she does.
more to come.
That's
Yes.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. And we also welcomed Heather Moran as our new director of
Yes.
faith formation this fall. That ties right into the work of that board with our focus on education, especially with children. And
Yes.
she has been doing a great job getting us going with our Discovery Kids Sunday School that takes place during our service, recruiting
Mhm.
with and working with a wonderful team of teachers. And
Mm.
now, as we approach Christmas Eve, she's working on planning the children and families Christmas service at 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
which sounds like it's going to be really great. We got a little sample of the costume selection
Yeah.
last Sunday in worship. So, really looking forward to that.
Oh, I know it's gonna be great. Like donkeys, and I think she said she had what, like a lobster or pigs. I don't know, but so many. I know.
Christmas
It,
lobster.
it reminds me of that movie, like that
Is that Love
movie,
Actually?
Love Actually, with the lobster. I know, but Heather, yeah, it's been so great to have Heather, like with she's like a 22-year kindergarten teacher, right? And so you just look at how she's been able to get right in there and recruit these teachers. Here's your curriculum, here's your training, here's the times, and that just is so helpful for parents. You're coming in, and I mean, I know as a parent of 2 elementary kids, I can barely get them clothed and out the door, right? So coming in and coming to church, where sometimes it's like, oh, I have to sit in church, my own sixth grade son sometimes, right? But
Mm-hmm.
having something that's both like preparing them to be in worship, they have this time with their families and sit and kind of start the worship, and then they can go to Sunday school classes, right, where they're encountering deep core values and compassion, and kind of working. It's been great to see that there's an overwhelming need and support from these families looking for spiritual formation opportunities and education, but also just community building. Like
Mm-hmm.
these, they need their own little niche. So we're so happy to have Heather with us, and she's done such a great job in helping get started our children's choir. Adam
Mm-hmm.
Whitty and Shannon and Heather, kind of all working together on that. So that's been really great. And then of course, gosh, the Christmas Eve, Children and Families Christmas Eve service, that's going to be so exciting. I know we're in this, December 13th. It's Friday 13th. Here we
Mm-hmm.
are in the middle of Advent. Christmas is coming. We're just the magic of Christmas is starting to really, I think, fall upon us. Where even in difficult seasons, we find ourselves in, we're ever closer as we prepare and wait and anticipate, and I think longing for that love to break in, each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing to kind of be here right now and look back and think about all the amazing people that we have in our community, and that we're approaching this wonderful season together in the life of the
Mm-hmm.
church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. To that end, I just wanted to touch real quick on our longest night service that we'll have this coming Thursday, December 19th, if folks are listening to this in advance of that.
Yes.
I know some people have asked about that, and sometimes in other faith settings, it's called a blue Christmas, but it's
Mhm.
tied to the solstice where we do have like the longest night of darkness in the year. And then our days start to get longer again and our nights shorter right after that.
Yes.
But that's an opportunity for people to come, and it's a contemplative service,
Mm,
honoring just our sometimes our mixed feelings about Christmas, that it
mm,
is a wonderful time, and certainly in our faith story,
mhm.
nothing takes away from the amazement and the wonder of Jesus being born anew every year.
Yeah.
But just acknowledging that for some people, it is an ambivalent time and even a
Mm,
difficult time, if they've lost loved ones in this past year. And so their
yeah.
traditions are looking a little different this year,
Mhm,
or if they've lost loved ones around this time of year. And so for
mhm.
them, it's always an anniversary of that memory.
Yeah.
Just holding space for that and
Mm,
knowing that it's not all, shiny paper and ribbons and bows for all of our
yeah.
folks.
Yeah. I know that's one of my favorite services always. It's like when you don't really, when you're kind of doing the work, right? Or clergy person or minister,
Mhm,
we go through the rhythm and the church year and all the things, but you don't really just take time, or I don't. I'm not one of those people who like takes time to look at like, oh, things might be difficult, or Jenny, you might
mhm,
have this might be a hard day, or it's sort of a optimistic positivity move into. And so because some of us are like that, and some of us, like you mentioned, some actually have really traumatic losses, right? That there aren't spaces that just kind of welcome that kind of feeling or emotion. These are services that are plugged into this season on purpose to
mhm,
say this is equally as important, right? The flip side of our joy is the mourning and grief that gives way to, right? When we sow seeds of laughter, we sow seeds of tears, and they
mhm,
are two sides to the same coin in our human story. So I'm hopeful that people who don't know about the service or have never participated will see it as this deep invitation to just come and be. There's no sermon on those during that service. There's a lot of music. There's reflection time,
mhm,
peaceful listening, and just being together. So I'm so glad that you highlighted that and reminded folks that that's an invitation. I hope we can continue to create spaces in our communal worshiping life that prioritize deep reflection, contemplation, and space for grief and loss as much as we do worship that is exuberant and full of praise, right?
mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, so meaningful. And again, thank you for partnering in all of these things, Sarah. It's so great that we have a team of dedicated staff who support the arc of our Christian story and make space for everyone to connect and belong.
Mhm.
What kind of things do you all as a family look forward to, or you yourself, Sarah, during the Advent or Christmas season, or what's coming? I know it
Mhm.
can be different for all of us, but what's something meaningful for you?
Well, ever since we moved away from central Pennsylvania 10 years ago, we have had my mom come visit us. So I think most people know that my dad had passed away in 2012. But when we moved in 2014 to Hawaii, starting that first year, my mom would always make the trip out to
Mm-hmm.
see us over Christmas time. And so now that we're in Omaha, she's still in Pennsylvania. She continues to come out at Christmas. So she'll actually get here next Wednesday. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully she'll come to the longest night service. I think
Nice.
she'll appreciate that too. But
Mm-hmm.
with her here, we just kind of hang out, bake
Mm-hmm.
cookies, show her around Omaha, some of
Yeah.
the decorated, places. We get lots of good recommendations from
Yeah.
folks at church to do little day trips. We've gone down to Lincoln,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So really, once we moved, we got more used to being just the five of us doing our
Mm-hmm.
different traditions together for the various holidays throughout the year. But
Yeah.
it's great to have her come and join us over Christmas. So that tends to be the highlight. How about
Oh
you?
yeah. Yeah. Same. I mean, I feel this, similar when you are a pastor and you move. You kind of get to your own traditions. We always call it the four family. The kids always call it our which family? Our four family.
Oh.
So they were little, they were like, oh yeah, it's just our four family. So our four family, have a lot of traditions for holidays. Because of, being a pastor, Christmas Eve, you're always doing church things. And then Christmas morning, living away from family, was always sort of this wake up, and our core four family just spends the day together doing, basically drink your coffee and wear your PJs all day and play, open your presents and just be together. Sometimes we would go on a walk or, something outside like that, depending on where we lived, if it was like snowing. But just the four family. And then, of course, visiting with our family as often as possible who we live distant from. And right now, moving from North Carolina to Omaha, grandma and grandpa and my brothers and like the biggest part of my family lives in North Carolina. So we'll fly there and go visit them. And, just the kids will be in heaven, grandma heaven. So that'd be fun. But,
Mhm.
family, I think too, being a minister and moving a lot, like the church is a big part of our family. And,
Mhm.
it's just like family, like the family of your origins, the family of your friends, and then your church family. So Christmas Eve at church was always one of the highlights for us. And we do Advent at home, which is, we have the Advent candles and we light every night. We do Advent
Mhm.
together. And so then we finally come on Christmas Eve. And I think for my kids, it's been a lot of change. We've moved a lot and we've uprooted them, and they're young. And so they've had to start over. And sometimes you can over pretend that it's not hard for them because they do
Mhm.
so well and adjust. But Advent and the Advent wreath at home is one of those things that when everything else changes, it's one of the things. And we have this Advent wreath that they made, and it's like little wooden pieces, and the candles are almost burned down and falling all over. But it was so important for us to keep that because it reminds us like that, whether it's here, there, anywhere, that God's light is always shining on them. And so I'm hopeful that these traditions and these prayers and this communal kind of thing that we do as a family and as a church family is one of the things that will always be present for my kids in their lives. And even if they don't know it, that God's, shining light in the dark is
Mhm.
shining into their lives. So I really think, growing up as a church brat too, this is one of the things that even though church life can be difficult and there can be hard things that we experience together, that in breaking light and love is always there, and it's a choice for us. How do we light those candles, and how do we raise them, and how do we show the world that this, is what it means to be part of God's beloved people? And
Mhm.
not everybody knows that they're a part. You don't have to be in the church to be part, right? But it's our job to show that light outside of that place. So many things that I look forward to. And, there are hard things, but there are always places to find hope and know that that joy is, rising within us. So for that, I am so thankful. I'm so thankful to be a pastor, pastoring with Countryside, and that my family has been welcomed in, like yours. I mean, my kids love Maggie to death. We just have these great ways of the church enveloping our
Mhm.
children. And so we look forward to growing together for many more Advent and Christmas seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been such a wonderful journey. I always think, and I don't know if people know this, 2 years ago on Christmas Eve, I was really sad because my job with the UCC conference was
Mm.
in a lot of peril, and there was a lot of turmoil there. And there was a picture that um, it's I think it made it into the newsletter right after, so probably the January newsletter, and you can tell because Maggie has green hair back then. But it's this picture of me leaning on my husband's shoulder. This is
Oh,
when we had just joined and we were just worshiping there, and
mm.
I from the front I was sobbing.
Oh,
um
yeah,
because it was just, I think the Christmas Eve services too, especially, are kind of like those place markers. And you tend to think like, what was last year at this time like, or what was a couple years
yes.
ago? And so it just felt like, oh gosh, this is not where I thought I would be on Christmas Eve.
Hmm.
But I'm so grateful that now 2 years later, to be full time on staff and
Mm.
to, continue to, now have Maggie with her natural hair color, you know, growing and engaging in the
Yeah.
life of the church, and my other two kids, Jack and Irene, and my husband. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's just really, it's been a journey, but it's been a hopeful time, and
Mm.
really a great time to look forward to more.
Mm. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all of our village who's out there. We are always here for you, and we are thrilled to be in community with you. We do hope that as you think about your own place, in our community, at Countryside, in your own heart, that there's always a place for you at Countryside. I hope you'll join us at some point this Advent season, either for Christmas Eve services or a small prayer group. But please reach out and know that, God's love is within and with each one of us. And, may that hope and joy and peace and love fill you today and always. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.